Hello and welcome to GMBN Tech Ask, the show where you've used hashtag Ask GMBN Tech and we've picked up that question out of the comments and answered it on a show like this. And my first question today, Owen, is from Serge J. Grabham. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong.
That's right. That's
but can you swap from resin to sintered pads on the same disc? I thought you cannot without changing the disc. I'm going to say yes and no as your quick question here, because we always advise that you change your discs when you're changing from different materials in pads, because generally when you're meshing the two together, when you're bedding in brakes, you're meshing them together and you're moving material from the pads onto the rotor, so those two materials will bind together and cause you to stop. If you then changed your pads and you had, say, for example, sintered, now trying to mesh with resin, it might not work as well. Or, as you said to me earlier, you can do it, but it might take a lot of material out of your pads in order to sort of, pull out that material and create its new little meshing partner, would you say?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sintered is quite aggressive. Obviously, you do have to check. There are some resin-only rotors out there.
Yes.
More so from Shimano.
It will say on the disc, so do check.
Yeah. But I think the best practice is so yes, you can do it, and you're right in terms of the kind of transfer of material, but it's just better to switch rotors at the same time.
If you can afford it.
Yeah, it's a bit more spendy, but it is worth it because it means you're not going to eat half a brake pad. Lots of systems now, the brake pad, like the backing plate, is almost as big as the pad material, just because our tolerances are really tight, and some brands have decided to make the actual pad material a bit smaller, which will mean that it will use it quicker. So yeah, I just switch them both. This one's from Thomas Matthews, and it's an interesting one. It's quite an engaging one. Can I spend lots of money to save £1 or £2 off my bike, so £1 in weight versus the actual pound coins?
Yes, you can.
What are the advantages of that versus if he can sort of shave a few pounds off his own body weight? Like, which one's sort of one is cheaper than the other?
Yes.
Which one's the most beneficial? Well, I guess it depends, really. There's a lot of factors going on in this one. So, I mean, briefly, yeah, if you can kind of create yourself into a hench 24 beast on a bike, and that means you're kind of maybe the balance between muscle to fat is increasing to muscle, your ride experience is going to be very, very more enjoyable and lots of fun, and you'll probably be faster because of it too.
Assuming you've not gone too far, and I've got friends who have gone that way and they just start feeling
gone
ill and get run down all the time. So sometimes fat is a good thing.
Oh, right, okay. I was just being bodybuilder.
Oh,
right,
hench,
okay. Yeah, no,
hench,
we're not talking about we're not weight weenies. That's a different channel for that stuff. I mean, on your bike, there's lots of places where you can save weight and it can not really notice any difference. I mean, lots of super light handlebars or super light saddles. Great headline figure of, oh, my handlebar is so much lighter or my seat is so much lighter. In terms of performance, if it's less comfortable, either the bar or the saddle, it's not really going to be useful. Whereas saving weight on wheels can make a really big difference, and it's a dynamic part of the riding experience, so you can feel the difference. And also in terms of suspension, and suspension gets very quickly complicated, but essentially there's a difference between the sprung and unsprung mass, and so the sprung bit is what's being held up by the springs, and then the unsprung is the bit that's not. And if lots of bikes have the balance is the wrong way around, so lots of e-bikes have got really nice feeling suspension because they've got that really heavy battery, they've got that really heavy motor, so it means the kind of unsprung sections are in the right balance. So if you start chopping chunks of weight out from wheels and tyres, that can help that feel. But obviously it always comes at a kind of risk. If you put super light cross-country tyres on, they are more fragile. So it depends on your riding experience. So looping back to your full question, yeah, head down the gym, get hench for 24, enjoy riding your bike lots, spend money on bits that matter, so spinny bits and unsprung mass. Don't worry too much about super light saddles or grips.
Or maybe don't lose weight, just go and do some hill reps and increase the power, because that's a better way of increasing your power to weight is don't worry about the weight bit, just get hench on hills. Okay, my question from Michelium, who says, how do you know if your suspension needs a service and you exceed your 200 hours of riding? don't exceed your 200 hours of riding. Please don't. We've got really useful videos on the channel that show you how to do intermediate services, like a lower leg service, or some rear shocks can be serviced as well. So do check out those videos, because you can do that a couple of times a year to keep it ticking over, and then go and get your damper serviced annually at worst. But how do you know if it's bad? Generally, it will start to feel a bit notchy or grainy, or just generally not smooth. You want to check your seals, make sure that they're a nice, perfect little rubber circle, and that they're not fraying, there's no holes in them. You shouldn't be leaking any oil or fluids anywhere. And I've had forks and shocks that have made slurping noises and squelchy noises that tend to be a sign that something needs looking at. Generally, if you've ridden 200 hours, then it probably does need a service anyway. So do check out our videos, try and do a intermediate service on it, and see what it looks like when you open it up. Is there any scratches? Is there any dirt? Has the fluid changed colour from a nice golden colour to black or brown? If it has, change it at least, but maybe talk to a technician about a full service as well.
Yeah, I feel like if you've run over your 200 hours, that's a good chunk of riding, so well done. I just run to a specialist with maybe some beers in hand to apologise for what may lie inside. But yeah, service your forks. With that. Yeah. Got a hot question here from AC now. He'd like to upgrade his rotors to a bigger size. Sensible idea. Definitely condone that and support that. So he's got a BR MT10 caliper, and he's got 160 rear and 180 front, and he's checked frame compatibility, but he's still a bit confused. He can't understand the performance gap between some of these the Shimano rotors, so it's a bit of a nerdy name, but the SMRT30M and the SMRT54M. He'd like to go for the 203 and the 180. So, okay, these are effectively very, very, very similar rotors, but there is a difference. One's 10% lighter. The rest of it, that's from the Shimano website, so there's, that's great. We're saving key unsprung mass here. I would say, and they're both resin only, so it's not like you're going to get a performance upgrade of changing to a different rotor material that you can use sintered on. So personally, I'd probably spend a little bit more and go for the Shimano rotors that you can use sintered on. I think the other things are very subtle. So in terms of shape of the rotor, the Dior one has got slightly bigger cutouts and a slightly more wavy profile, and from experience, having large cutouts intermittently through the disc material helps clean the pads in really muddy and grimy conditions, so potentially that's going to be an advantage. I mean, officially the only thing that Shimano says that it's 10% lighter.
That's probably from all the cutouts, maybe.
No, exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's where it is. I mean, yeah, look to use the correct adapters that you're doing. So, make sure it's for a 203, not a 200. Do confirm that your frame can have that much extra leverage and braking load on it as well, because, yeah, you don't want to have a cracked frame just because you kind of decided to run the wrong rotors. I feel like that's it, really. In terms of rotor performance, there's lots of variation in shape. There's lots of marketing spin on how different rotor patterns will aid and boost cooling. Not so much hard science there. But one thing I would say is do look at some pads that you can, or rotors rather, that you can use with both resin and sintered pads. Sorry, coughing on the expectation and excitement of a sintered pad. So yeah, apart from that, you're all set. Enjoy. Let us know which one you go for.
Okay, next question from who says, why don't you use torque settings for tightening spokes? I get they'd be different to try and true a wheel, but assuming a rim is straight, I'd like a number rather than going for tight-ish. I mean, there is a number, but it's on the tension of the spoke. So you're not tightening the nipple per se, you're tightening it into the rim in order to create tension on a spoke. And if you watch a professional wheel builder, they have a spoke tension gauge that will be checking the tension on that spoke. So it's not so much the emphasis on the nipple, which is why we don't have a torque setting for the nipple.
Another question here. Many questions.
Poor line choices. Yeah. Poor guy.
Poor line choices. No, good name. Right. He wants to top off, or top up, I feel like. Top up his sealant, but have different brands than then he's in the tyres already. We're talking about tubeless tyres here and tubeless sealant. Is it okay to mix sealants? This is a great question.
Is it?
It is. It's a really good question. I think a lot of people think that tyre sealant is all same, but it's not. And it's not just marketing spiel or marketing hype about as does this and as does that. Lots of tyre sealants work in different ways and use different sort of additive parts and different chemical reactions to help seal your tyres. So some you really can't mix and shouldn't mix because you'll have sort of exciting chemical reactions inside your tyre. For the tyre, it's essentially fine, but if it got near sort of like bare aluminium rim, which hopefully it won't, it could eat away at rims. So don't mix them, basically. Some tyre sealants work okay together, but I think it's just a better blanket to say, just stick. If you've got PTs in there, just keep using PTs. If you've got orange seal, just keep using orange seal. Okay, they've got an endurance and a regular. The endurance lasts a little bit longer. Yeah, those are cross-compatible, but brands have got very unique solutions and literally chemical solutions in their tyres to this flat fixing issue. So I'd say, yeah, don't mix.
The recipes are different, so some might be chemical-based, some might be water-based, and when you start mixing those together, you don't know what's going to happen, and it might not perform at its best. So, yeah, that's why.
Well, that's the last question of our Ask GMBN Tech. If you've got more questions to ask GMBN Tech, then hashtag Ask GMBN Tech, and we will try and answer your questions.
And where do they write that?
In any comment. On the off-road channel, anywhere.
In a comment?
Yeah.
In any video?
Yeah. You could just hammer away like a full keyboard warrior, and we may or may not be able to answer your question, but we will try.
We certainly can't find it unless you use hashtag Ask GMBN Tech.